Hi, this is JP Morgan.
And this is Kenneth Merrill.
Today we've got Nicole Garrabrant with us here, and she's going to help us test these two mirrorless cameras.
We have the Nikon Z6 and the Sony A7III.
You know, on paper, these two cameras look extremely similar. I mean, the specs across the board are almost exactly the same. There are some things about them that are a little different, but they're pretty comparable. They really are.
Very comparable. We're using the 50mm 1.8 Nikor S lens for the Nikon, and then the Sony has their new Zeiss 50mm 1.4.
1.4. So these are great lenses, native lenses to both of these camera platforms. Obviously, lenses have an effect on picture quality and all those kinds of things, but this is the best that these two platforms have to offer, so we're going to use those to compare them. We should definitely give a shout out to Borrow Lenses. It sponsors our segment here today and allows us to get these cameras and to be able to show them and to compare them.
One thing I really like about Borrow Lenses is if you have a shoot in another state or something, you can actually just rent all the gear, all the bells and whistles you don't have or don't want to take, and ship them straight to your hotel. So when you arrive, your gear's there waiting for you. You don't have to haul it on the airplane or worry about checking it.
Slap the sticker on it and send it back. So it's a great way to test out other gear, great way to get gear that you don't have, you need something extra for a shoot, so Borrow Lenses. We also should give a shout out to B&H. It's a great supporter of the Slanted lens here, and we appreciate their support as well. So let's get into some testing and see how they're going to compare with one another. So for our first test, we're going to take a look at picture quality. We're going to look at her face and the skin tone on both these different sensors, just see how they compare with one another. So Kenneth's already started. The first thing I look at these things is what I feel every time, and I just love warmer skin tone, and I just don't like the kind of a little more greenish sense of the Sony, and a little more warmth of the Nikon I like a lot. But they are super close to one another.
Super close. Again though, I did boost the exposure on the Sony by one stop on this.
You
and
did.
I could have even nudged it a little bit more,
A little
I
bit
think.
more, yeah. You see the highlights on her face are just a little down, so it could have been a tiny bit brighter.
So Sony's a little darker, a little more green. Overall, the images look
They look so
very similar. My favorite test we do here is the dynamic range test. So we're gonna shoot both cameras, same setting, same background. We have a little bit of sun shining on the wall on the left-hand side of the frame, so we have some white parts of the image, and the sky in the background is also really bright, and then we have more shadowy parts on the right side. We're exposing for her face that as our base exposure, and then we're gonna overexpose a few stops, and then underexpose the image a few stops, and we'll correct all of those images in post to bring them to a proper exposure level and just see how they look, what's clipping, what's too grainy, and which camera stands out. Right off the bat, I'll just tell you the Nikon is blowing out the building and the sky behind her. Her face is properly exposed by the meter, but the highlights of the image are already blown out. The Sony, across the board, the Sony exposes one stop darker than the Nikon.
It does.
So we shot according to our meter, and then I had to boost the exposure on all of the Sony images that we took by one stop, give or take.
So the Nikon is basically, because of the way they set their, its ISO is off.
Yeah.
It's really, they're pessimistic about their ISO.
I know, they really should set it higher.
Yeah, it's like, they should set their 200 should be at least 320, if not 400.
I will say both of these cameras I really liked when we underexposed them by one stop and then pushed it a little bit. I especially like the way the Nikon looks.
So this is minus one stop. Yeah, the Nikon's nice. Everything's holding nicely in the background.
Minus two stops, still looks amazing. I'm also amazed at how well these match. The Nikon's a little more magenta, but they look really similar. We didn't do any color adjustments, just exposure adjustments.
Very similar, yeah.
Minus three. The Sony starts to lose a little bit of saturation here at minus three stops. And it's starting to get a little bit, it's starting to get kind of grainy,
a little more grainy, yeah. The Sony's starting to see some grain at minus 3 stops.
The Nikon still looks really nice.
Nikon's always got a beautiful picture, and the softness of the picture is really nice. Boy, at 4 stops, four stops, the Sony's looking very, very grainy.
The Nikon still looks beautiful, but you are starting to see that grain.
Yep.
And then minus 5 stops, which is just insane, by the way. These images are almost black before you...
Yeah, and look at the Sony. It's like
the Sony is like
it's
sandpaper.
A Picasso. Yeah, it's sandpaper for sure.
The Nikon still looks really good, but you are starting to see some pattern noise.
So yeah, it's amazing how the grain on the Sony has just materialized.
But let's keep in mind, again, the Sony is one stop darker. They've overrated it. And so this is really kind of basically like six stops under for the Sony.
It is.
So I would say minus 4 on the Nikon is looking closer in grain to minus 3 on the Sony.
So head to head like that does not really tell you the whole story, other than you're going to have better low light capabilities with the Nikon.
Yeah, exactly. Now we go into overexposure, +1 stop. Of course, the Nikon was already blowing out the sky in the building. Now it's way out. She looks great.
She looks great.
Sony's doing fine overexposed like this. Nikon is gone, and we're clipping on her nose here.
Clipping on her nose. We're still holding her face. A little bit of clip on her nose there.
I don't think so.
Not much, but just, yeah, with the background.
But the background is gone now.
Losing it.
And then, of course, +3 stops, the Nikon is completely blown out. And the
Sony's still holding her face.
It's holding her face just fine, yeah, but the background's blown out.
Yeah.
I mean, again, so to my eye, 0 on the Nikon and Sony +1 actually look very similar. The Sony's still holding a little bit better. Feels like the dynamic range is actually pretty much the same on both cameras. It's just distributed differently because of the way they rate the sensor.
It's moved around a little bit.
So we started this test at 1600 ISO, and again, I bumped the exposure by 1 stop on all of the Sony images to match the level we exposed by the meter. Out of the box, of course, Sony looks a little more green. At 1600 ISO, though, both images are looking pretty clean. Maybe a little more noise.
A little more noise
in the
on the Sony, just a tiny bit more noise. Well, it's there. It's noticeable.
Looking at 3200 ISO, you really start to see it in the Sony. You're just starting to see it in the Nikon, I think.
Wow, look at it, 6400. Yeah. The Sony is very, very grainy now, and
Though I will say the Nikon seems a little more colorful, you know? All right, 12,800. Again, definitely more colorful on the Nikon.
Yeah, you see the reds rolling through it, and you see a lot of different colors playing around in there. Whereas the Sony just seems like grain is building, but the color isn't.
The color does look nicer in the Nikon, though. Oh, the skin tone.
Skin tone looks really quite good, and certainly not as grainy. 25,600.
Yeah,
Sony is a pointless.
Yeah, pointless painting.
Yeah.
The Nikon, you're seeing a lot of color now around the detail, around her.
Yeah, it's 25,600. You know.
Overall, I mean, and again, we're having to push the Sony.
Look at all the reds coming off from her eye.
Look at that. That's so interesting.
It is. It's almost like red eyelashes or something. There's these red blooms coming off from her eye.
The Nikon just goes really colorful, and the Sony just goes super sandpapery.
Yep.
That is wild.
It is wild. Datacolor and their monitor calibration products have been part of our workflow here at the Slanted Lens for years. I'm pretty excited about the fact they just released a new product called the Spyder X Elite. The Spyder X Elite does several things that I think are very helpful. Number one, it calibrates very quickly. It takes about 2 minutes to calibrate your monitor, which is fabulous. Also, it's very simple to use. The software just walks you through the process, gets your calibration done very quickly. It'll prompt you in a couple of weeks when it's time to do it again. I've always thought it doesn't make any sense to go out and to take a great image and be concerned about exposure and color, and then take it back and put it on a computer that is not calibrated and now do your correction and your editing. It makes no sense whatsoever. Calibrate your monitor, make sure your monitor is correct, and especially with the Spyder X Elite, your highlight and your shadow detail, you'll see that exactly where you need to place it to make sure the image looks excellent, looks exactly the way you want it to look, and that's what really matters. You can check it out at our affiliate program either at B&H or at Amazon, so Datacolor Spyder X Elite. It's time for the autofocus test. I love this test because when you have a model walk straight towards the camera, it's hard for cameras to hold that. That's really the best test of your autofocus. We're going to take a look at both these cameras and see how they hold.
So in this autofocus test, the Nikon did really well, actually. It doesn't have their face detect technology, but it does have a sort of generic tracking, and it locked onto her face, and it held it pretty well throughout. There were a couple frames that were a little soft, but overall I would say 95% of them were acceptably sharp. Yeah, and throughout the day, I found the autofocus to be really reliable and responsive. I didn't have any issues with it.
You don't have eye tracking, you don't have face detection, you don't have any of those kinds of products in it, or processes, but you know, it looks really dang good.
Yeah, yeah. The Sony A7 III was a weird experience this time. We've tested the camera before, and it has performed really well in our other tests, but this time it just was not consistent. The first half of the photos that you see here, most of them are a little soft. When the subject starts further away, I think the eye detect has a hard time.
It has a very difficult time, you know, and so, but once they got closer, locked on it, and it was much better.
Yeah, it was very good up here at the front. There were only a couple that were out.
Yep.
But I will say the Nikon performed really well. So,
which was surprising. They kind of both surprised us a little bit. We thought the Sony would do much better than it did, and thought the Nikon might not do as well. But the reality is, I think they're both pretty
they're
solid.
both pretty good, yeah.
Yep.
We're also going to take a look at the texture and resolution of the image. So we're just shooting this brick wall with a little pub sign written on it. And we'll see, they are different lenses, so that'll have a little bit of an effect on the image. But overall, we just want to see how they look in terms of sharpness and contrast and detail.
The brick wall on the pub. Boy, my first sense about this automatically, though, is that the Sony is a little bit sharper.
A little bit sharper.
More detail.
Resolves a little more.
Yep, just a little more detail, a little more resolved. And the Nikon is not quite as sharp. It's a little softer.
Yeah.
Not, when I say soft, we're not talking about soft.
Right. No, but I agree with you. If you blew this up, you would have a little more resolving power on the Sony. I agree.
And they're within, megapixel-wise, they're within,
0.5.
0.5, yeah. They're pretty much the same camera with regards to megapixels.
Both these cameras shoot 4K video up to 30 frames, and I think they both do 120 at 1080p. We're going to test just to do basic video shot, just kind of look at the difference. The thing with DSLR, or not DSLRs, but mirrorless cameras too, is the video quality can vary greatly between the two. Sometimes one image will be really compressed or fuzzy, another will be a lot sharper or clearer. The Sonys usually win out in this category just because they have so many features packed into that little camera, but I'm interested to see how the Nikon does. Now, Nikons really aren't built for video, so I never really expect too much. And this image is about what I would have expected.
It's just a general, I mean, you see a softness there in her face.
But I feel like the whole image is a little over-sharpened.
Over-sharpened.
Like the contrast.
The contrast is up.
It's a little intense. The Sony has a much...
Not near as crunchy. The contrast is much...
Yeah, it looks nice. The Sony's always looked nice with video. Mm-hmm. I think the skin tone's a little flat, but I don't think it's any worse than the Nikon is in this case. Actually, both look very similar.
Yeah. So we're going to test the high frame rate on each of these cameras now, 120 frames per second at 1080. So just see what both of them look like, see if there's any artifacting, just see how they react to that 120 frames a second. That's a nice thing to look at. This is slow motion?
This is a slow motion.
I love slow motion, man.
It looks pretty good on the Nikon. I mean, of course, 120 frames per second, it's always going to be super compressed, kind of pixelated. Still looks really crunchy, but the motion's nice and there's good detail there. It doesn't feel like it's overly compressed.
It just has a sense about it that it's been over dealt with.
Yeah, I agree.
It feels like you've just tried a little too hard.
The Sony here, again, much softer image, just like in the normal recording. Mm-hmm. You still keep the fine detail, even though you have all the hair and it's slow motion, you know, lower bit rate.
This is way too flat for me, though. I would push the blacks up a lot on this. I really would.
I would definitely add contrast.
Yep.
I mean, the Sony always wins in the video, but here you can see the difference. If you're thinking of getting the Nikon for photo, now you know what kind of video you can expect from it.
Yep. That's the video you're going to get.
Yep. So what do we think overall here?
You know, I love a lot of things about the Nikon. I've always loved the picture. I love just the beautiful color that's there. I love the ease of use of the cameras. But I love the video more on the Sonys. I really do love the videos more on the Sonys. And it's a lot easier because a lot of people have so many EF mounted lenses to adapt them to the Sonys with the metabones and things like that. It's just, that's an easier workflow than trying to go to, you know, try to adapt things to a Nikon.
I really like this Nikon camera. I like the way it feels, the way it shoots. I love the EVF. I love the image quality out of it. I love how sensitive it is to light, though it takes a little bit of adjusting in terms of workflow. If it were me and I just wanted a camera that I was just shooting stills with, I'd probably go with the Nikon. Though the Sony is right there. And so if you plan on shooting almost any video, I'd go with the Sony.
So there you go. A lot of this is personal preference. How does it feel in your hands? You know, what exactly are you shooting? What lenses do you already have? You know, I think these decisions are made on a lot of factors. And these cameras become so close to each other. And someone said, well, these cameras are so close together. Why do you even bother reviewing them? And I said, well, because you still have to make a decision. How does it feel to you? How does it shoot for you? How does it match what you do? And so we're trying to give you that information so you can make a decision based on what you do and what you'd like to accomplish with these cameras.
Speaking of shooting video, we just recently launched a download that you can check out at theslantedlens.com where we teach you all the basics of how to shoot video with DSLR or mirrorless style cameras. We go over things like lighting, audio. Audio is a huge one. You really need good audio to basically do anything in video. And all the settings and tricks that we know to get the best image you can out of the little mirrorless or DSLR camera that you have.
So make sure you also subscribe to the Slanted Lens. Join our Facebook group, great community there where people can share images and like and dislike and give you good feedback. Also, we want you to like us, follow us, subscribe to us. We want you to be one of our family, one of our huge family.
If you want to know more about these cameras, you really should just rent them from a place like Bar Lenses or your local camera house and try them out.
Use them.
Because that's really the best way to make a decision here.
It really is. All right, so keep those cameras rolling.
And keep on clicking.
Let's get to these cameras. I think the most important thing we need to know is, Nicole, which of these cameras do you think visually is the most aesthetically pleasing?
The more beautiful camera. I would say the Nikon here. I'm really digging, you know, the smooth buttons that it has, a nice sleek look. It looks comfortable to hold. Of course, any camera is my best friend, but you know, for a photographer's sake, I think the Nikon is going to be a better fit.
So there you have it, an extremely highly scientific look at these two cameras, and Nicole chooses the Nikon.